Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Boom Comic Source collaboration. It's your DC Spotlight for the week of May 7th, 2024. Relatively small week considering. I'm liking it. I'm liking these smaller weeks. Wonder how long DC will keep it up. I have a feeling with summer coming and all these events and that sort of thing, we're going to start seeing the number of books ramp up. But in the meantime, yeah, it's a lot easier to digest when it's a fewer books. That being said, I don't know if there's anything that really stood out for me this week. Kind of looking over the titles, but it wasn't a bad week. I don't think there was any stinkers here. Um, and I don't know if it's a coincidence, but no anthologies. So I don't know. What do you think, Rocky?
Well, I actually thought it was. I thought it was a little bit of kind of a meh week for me. I didn't. Nothing really stood out for me. I was even a little disappointed. I will say that I continue to have sort of mixed feelings about absolute power. But just when I'm feeling a little bit negative about it, I have reasons to feel optimistic and positive about it. So it's still the jury's still out for me on this organic movement evolution toward absolute power with Amanda Waller, the Brainiac Queen, and Failsafe, but yeah. But yeah, this was kind of a meh week for me, and a shorter week, like you said. Thank God, because you and I we read a lot of comics, and it's nice when we have shorter weeks, so we don't have to yap so much.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So, all right, let's dive right into it. First book we're going to talk about is Shazam number 11. This book it has a little bit of a different feel. It doesn't have quite have the timeless feel it had when Mark Waid was writing it, but I think it's still very good. Being written now by Josie Campbell. Manuela Lupacchino is the artist for this issue. Trish Mulvihill on colors. Troy Petrie on letters. Um, and it feels like she's leaning a little more into the family aspect, which is sort of what Jeff Johns did when he was writing it. But that one, with mostly Dale Eaglesham art, was kind of plagued by delays. I know no big surprises there, right? Um, but I feel like it's almost like Josie's trying to marry those two, kind of the timeless feel of, or if you'd rather say continuity light feel of what Mark Waid was doing, but bringing in more of the family aspect of what Jeff Johns was doing, because it's sort of interesting the way Shazam has gone. I mean, he definitely was more of a singular character. Yes, there was Mary Marvel. Yes, there was Captain Marvel Jr., but really he was more of a singular character when he started in his Power of Shazam in the 90s. I guess is probably the one that most people know. Jerry Ordway art and wrote some of it, but did almost all the art for it, and very classic covers. But then when Jeff Johns brought him back in those Justice League backups for the New 52, he really leaned into this idea of, hey, it's a Shazam family, and um, kind of interesting, being that Billy was always an orphan, to lean it go the other way and have him have these adopted siblings or foster siblings, and really lean into him sharing the power. And then it seemed like DC wanted to get away from that, and now, as I said, maybe Josie's bringing back in. I mean, right now it's only Billy and Mary that have powers. So it's going to be interesting to see how it progresses. I think with the way the last Shazam movie did, how it performed at the box office, that ship has sailed. So, again, I don't know how much it had to do with that. I mean, that leaned into everybody having powers as well. But I kind of like that dynamic, as much as, we say, hey, if you have more characters that have the same abilities, it kind of dilutes them and makes them less special. Um, the thing is, Captain Marvel, Shazam, he's always been so generic, right? His history is really interesting in terms of comic book history, how he was outselling Superman for a long period of time until DC basically used their deep pockets to put Fawcett out of business. It's not their finest hour. Um, not that anybody at DC now has had anything to do with that, but interesting how he kind of has never recovered since then. So it's like, if somebody's not really that iconic, does it really matter if he's kind of sharing his abilities or sharing his identity with others? I think having the Shazam family is what makes him somewhat unique. But anyway, this particular issue, I do like that also that Josie Campbell's continuing to flesh out some of the plot lines that Mark Waid had started. So this whole idea of Billy's adoptive or Billy's foster parents, rather, wanting to officially adopt him and his siblings, except for Mary, who's now turned 18. But there's still a lot of shenanigans that go on with their home, likely fallout from having it destroyed by Billy as Captain Marvel, who got in a superhero battle, um, and then having Zeus rebuild it. And so it seems like this house is like cursed with bad mojo or what have you. There's always some shenanigans going on and hijinks ensue. And this really is a book that can be for all ages. And I think Josie Campbell, she's a good choice to write it for that reason, because she keeps that continuity lighthearted aesthetic. The Lupacchino art is, it's not her best work, I would say, but it's very, very good. It does seem like she's using a little bit of a thicker line these days, but I don't know, maybe that's just me. Um, but overall, I enjoyed this issue. I would be lying if I said I didn't miss Mark Waid on the title, though. Um, he just he just has a way to connect to the characters that kind of nobody else does. But uh, I am liking where this title's going. It did feel the transition felt a little awkward going from Mark Waid to Josie Campbell. But now it feels like she's kind of getting her footing under her. And, she wrote the Mary Marvel mini last year, or maybe it was even the year before. How time flies, but she's very well suited for these characters. And then the last thing I'll say is um, both the variant covers on this issue are fantastic. I mean, Dan Mora does the main cover, and that one's cool too. But these variant covers are both really, really good. The one by Serge Acuna that's on the screen right now is awesome, and then the other one is by Brandt and Steen with Shazam and Mary Marvel arm wrestling. Yeah, they're both fantastic. So anyway, what are your thoughts on the latest issue of Shazam?
Uh, Honestly, if it wasn't, if you told me that Mark Waid wrote this issue, you'd have fooled me. You'd have successfully fooled me. The family dynamic is continuing, and the storyline that Mark Waid hinted at for a while is becoming manifest. It's evolving. This idea that the captain seems to be separate from Billy Batson, and I really like the potential here of expanding the mythology or reinterpreting it or revitalizing it for a new era, suggesting that the captain is a separate mind from Billy Batson, and that the captain wants, in this issue, it's revealed the captain is capable of forcing a change, forcing Billy Batson to, he can control Billy Batson to utter the phrase Shazam, and then basically be Shazam, and then when he's done being Shazam, fighting the Jeeper creatures in this issue, Billy Batson, when the transformation back to Billy Batson occurs, Billy Batson doesn't even remember what happened. So something is interesting. Because as the captain tells Billy in this issue, as those two consciousnesses are talking to each other, the captain makes it clear that the powers of Shazam have changed somewhat. The rules have changed, and I find that very interesting because, and I might be an outlier on this, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I've used the example before of the way Thor used to be with Donald Blake. He'd jam the stick down to the ground, and then Donald Blake would change into Thor. Well, where did Thor go? Suddenly Donald Blake became Thor. Where was Thor when Donald Blake was Donald Blake? Where was Thor? It's the same thing here. Where the hell's the captain when Billy's Billy Batson? I don't really, I'm not going to pretend to know the answer to that question. And I kind of like the idea. Could we be getting to a place where Billy Batson and the captain are two separate physical entities that are simply occupying the same space when they're merged? I mean, I'd be lying if I said I fully comprehend exactly what the hell's going on. But I like the fact that Josie Campbell's not afraid to play with it a little bit. And I also like the fact that the Rock of Eternity is actually the entrance to the Rock of Eternity is in the Shazam van, the Shaz van, and I like the fact that the lady from Social Services, Mrs. Sharma, shows up because they want to be the parents want to adopt all the children, but somebody is opposing the adoption, and it ends up being the big reveal. It ends up being Billy Batson's mother returns, and it looks as if the captain has been preventing Billy from seeing all these letters. And young Darla discovers that the captain's been keeping secrets from Billy, which I find very interesting as to and why is the captain doing that? The captain claims that don't worry, Billy, I've got the power, I've got the wisdom of Solomon. I'm doing this for your own good. It sounds like it's kind of an ignorant thing for the captain to do to his other half. And in any event, I thought it was. I think it's interesting. And at the same time, confusing me a little bit because I want to know, I'd like that spelled out a little bit more exactly what these rules are. And if Billy and Captain are separate entities, then how come they're not talking to each other while they're, why isn't it like the Firestorm Matrix, where you got Jason Roush talking to, or Ronnie Raymond talking to the Professor Stein? I mean, is that what Shazam's going to turn into? I don't know, but I have these questions, and I frankly don't mind it if that's the case necessarily. But I like the fact that Josie Campbell is playing with it a bit. I also think that this is the perfect combination of writer and artist. I think Emanuela Lapacino is the perfect type of style for these type of heroes, the Shazam family. She's got sort of like an animated look to it, but yet very crisp and clear, and it's perfect for Josie Campbell. And I think she's doing a good job on this storyline so far. I'm completely intrigued, and I'm really curious as to where it's going.
Yeah, I think you're right, especially in terms of the art style. Definitely a good choice. So yeah, we'll see where it goes from here. So, all right, up next we have, excuse me, Birds of Prey. We're up to issue number 9, written by Kelly Thompson. Jonathan Case and Gavin Goodry are the artists on this issue. Jordi Belair on colors, Clayton Cowell on letters. So we saw last issue at this swimsuit fashion show that Barbara Gordon was abducted, I guess you would say, and the Birds of Prey, pursued her abductors through this portal, and that's where this issue picks up. So, what were your thoughts on this one?
Well, I absolutely loved the last issue, issue 8. This was a downside for me. This issue, I felt the issue 9. I felt like Kelly Thompson was treading water in this issue because I was even disappointed. I was disappointed with the story because I didn't feel much happens, and I was disappointed with, of all things, the coloring. And I don't mind the muted tones in a lot of the issues leading up to this, but I felt that. Let me put it to you this way: the last issue ended with the Birds of Prey, with Barbara Gordon sort of being abducted by this unknown time traveler with connections to the Red. And the Birds of Prey, all of them agreed that they bravely followed into this portal, and no matter where the portal would lead, they very bravely wanted to jump in and rescue and follow and hopefully rescue Barbara Gordon in order to battle against this sort of almost like this the idea that somebody is out to kill Barbara Gordon. Meridian, who is the future Maps. She told Black Canary that, in the first, the reason why they couldn't have Barbara Gordon on the team is because she wants to protect Barbara Gordon, and then somebody from the future wants to kill her. Well, they jump through the portal, and this issue reveals that we're not even sure where they're at. That's the first beef I have. Secondly, everything is very dark. We have no idea where they are. And they could literally be anywhere. And I was a little disappointed if you're going to be jumping through from dimension to dimension or to a darker realm. Well, then I don't know. I just thought it was a little disappointing. Like the backgrounds were non-existent. There were no backgrounds. It was just a bunch of gray, and they were. Nothing. It was just a bunch of grayness. That's all there was. And then they finally locate Barbara Gordon, and it's not really Barbara Gordon. It ends up being the person that's manipulating them and leading them on a wild goose chase. And then they end up jumping through a portal again. So where were they? Well, they were in a place apparently that's just really boring, and it's just gray and black. That's boring, and the art's really boring too. The backgrounds are really boring, despite the fact that I really like. I mean, there are two artists on this in this issue, and the two artists are Jonathan Case and Gavin Goodry. I prefer Jonathan Case's art. It reminds me, has a little bit of a Jack Kirby feel to it, and I was hoping to see more of the Kirby crackle on the cover on the cover A. We got a little bit of Kirby crackle on the cover. The cover is by Leonard. It's a different cover artist, but in any event, the story here was very blah. It was very boring. Literally nothing happens. Barbara Gordon ends up being just. It's not even Barbara Gordon. They're on a wild goose chase, and meanwhile, Maps doesn't make it through the portal, and Maps ends up going back and recruiting the Zealot. Well, if we're going to get Zealot in this issue, I mean, Maps in desperation goes to recruit Zealot. Well, if Zealot was going to be part of this team, why didn't you have her from the beginning anyway? Why wasn't she with this team from the beginning anyway? It just seemed like sort of like kind of meh. The whole thing just seemed like a wasted issue to me. We could have skipped this issue and gotten right to the meat and potatoes. Have Zealot on the team to begin with and just hop right to it, skip this issue entirely. So I was disappointed with it, and I wasn't a huge fan of the fact that two artists were used. I would have preferred just one for consistency. The art was too dark. I thought the setting was too muted. I felt that I was disappointed overall. I'm still interested in the storyline. I'm still on board, obviously. I love Kelly Thompson. Thanks to you, I'm a subscriber to her Substack, and I'm a proud subscriber to her Substack, and I encourage people to check it out. It was just, this particular one was a little bit of a disappointment for me. But what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean the inconsistency in the art did. I mean, it wasn't enough to pull me out of the story, but it's clearly two different artists here. When the regular artist he did the cover on this one, Leonardo Romero, his style is so consistent, and that's what we've had throughout up to this point. So that's been a kind of a selling point of it. And so to have two different artists on it, yeah, it's not ideal. As far as the story goes, again, the characterization is where this book shines in terms of the interactions between the different characters, the way the dialogue, the banter back and forth, and what have you. That's where this book is at its best. In terms of the feel of it, and what I mean by that is just feeling like a Birds of Prey book. I think Kelly Thompson nails that as well. She just does a fantastic job with that. So I'll give her a lot of credit for that. But it does feel a little bit like this is the type of story that we've seen before. Not necessarily with the Birds of Prey, I would say, but we've seen this type of story before, where somebody is kidnapped, and they have kind of an unknown or mysterious enemy or what have you. And so it doesn't feel like we're necessarily breaking any new ground here. But again, with the strength of Kelly Thompson's writing being the interactions and the relationships between characters, I'm willing to kind of overlook that. But it is a little bit of a nitpick against it. And I'm fine with that if we have really fantastic art. But throughout, it's been a strange art choice. Like, even though, as I said, the Leonardo Romero art has been very consistent, it's not an art style that I really enjoy. I mean, to me, the Birds of Prey, this should be a very traditionally superheroic book, and so it should look very traditional. And I'm not even necessarily talking about the aesthetic when it comes to the line work or what have you. I'm even talking about the color work, because from the beginning, this book, the artwork has featured a very sort of muted palette, and that's not been as I said, my favorite type of art, my favorite art style. So it's still very good. I mean, like you said, it's still Kelly Thompson, so I'm still going to be on board. But yeah, you just wonder, like, you think back to the classic era of Birds of Prey, and I mean, I say it's a very traditionally superhero book, but almost at times, especially when it started out, almost like a spy or an espionage type. Not necessarily to the level of Checkmate, but they certainly were doing covert missions and what have you. But I can't ever think of an era of Birds of Prey where it wasn't colored very brightly, with like primary type colors and really giving it a almost a DC house style superhero look. So uh, anyway, up next we have Suicide Squad, uh, Kill the Justice League, number 4. This is the one that's based on the video game. This particular issue is all about Captain Boomerang. It's written by John Layman. Art is by Jesus Harvas. Colors by David Barron. Letters by Ann World Design. Um, and I like the connectivity here of this is maybe the issue where it feels sort of most like a traditional DC book in terms of Amanda Waller running the Suicide Squad and what her plans are to put a team together and what have you. Now, this is also an issue where it feels um, very much like a situation where if you have played these video games, you're probably getting a lot more out of this than I am, right? Because basically the point of the series is, okay, you had the Arkham video games that started the Batman family and what have you, and then the latest one that came out was Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. And okay, how do you get from the Arkham series of games to the latest one that came out starring the Justice League? So and the Suicide Squad. So this series really bridges the gap between those two series. This is kind of okay. How did it happen? How did Amanda Waller put together the team and that sort of thing? So again, I think if you're immersed into those video games, you're probably getting a lot more out of this than I am necessarily, which is fine because I am still enjoying this. I like John Layman's characterization for Digger Harkness for Captain Boomerang. I think it works very, very well. And the other part of this would be the Jesus Hervas rendering of Amanda Waller. I said it from the very first issue. I am not a fan of it. Like she's unrecognizable to me. Like I don't know who this person is that they've got in here, but it sure doesn't look like any Amanda Waller that I ever.
Yeah. Well, that's because she's 150 pounds lighter.
Yeah, I mean, it is significant. So that always pulls me out of the story every time she shows up on the page. I'm just like, who's this supposed to be again? So anyway, I did enjoy this issue. I thought it was a solid one. So, what were your thoughts on it?
I've really been enjoying this series. It's incidentally, you didn't catch this, but you actually you gave the incorrect title because in our preview copies it's incorrectly titled. It's not Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League issue 4. It's Suicide Squad Kills Arkham Asylum issue 4.
Right.
And I say that because you've already said it. This is how Amanda Waller chose the team that would go on to kill the Justice League in the video game. That's it in a nutshell. And one thing that we have discovered as we've read this series is that we had one issue that sort of focused on Deadshot, one on Harley, and this one focuses on Digger Harkness, of course, who is Captain Boomerang, and to really great effect. And what I love about this issue is just how well John Layman captures the attitude of Digger Harkness, and how he's basically surrounded by all these people with telepathic and mind-reading powers: Mad Hatter, the Hypnotic, Spellbinder, Crazy Quilt. And of course, they want to use Captain Boomerang. They want to control his mind, feed him illusions, and they sort of entice him with promises of money, diamonds, and precious gems, which is all an illusion. But he's kind of an idiot, Captain Boomerang. But he also has a lot of luck, and he's a survivor. He can survive through anything, and that's his sort of skill set. And ultimately, Amanda Waller, as Amanda Waller says, she wants to put together the best team that we know will go on to fight the Justice League, but that's controlled by Brainiac, and she doesn't want to have people with duplicate powers. Like, she doesn't need more than one person who has a particular ability. It's kind of wasted. So she basically puts them all in a room and says, okay, you, you guys got to, only one of you can leave this room. So you got to kill each other. And Captain Boomerang, Digger Harkness, only he has enough luck that he's in a room where all these sort of mind controlling villains from Mad Hatter, Hypnotic, Spellbinder, and Crazy Quilt, they all end up killing themselves, each other with their mind powers. And I guess Captain Boomerang basically just got lucky, and he manages to survive. And at the end, he sees through the final illusion of Mad Hatter. And John Layman does a really good job with the dialogue here. And Mad Hatter just doesn't know Captain Boomerang very well, because the illusion he creates is in a dystopian, or in a bright future where an older Digger Harkness is being counseled and telling the story about how he escaped from Arkham. And of course, the only reason Captain Boomerang can see through the illusion is that, as he tells Mad Hatter before he throws a knife through his head, that, there's no way I'm going to live that long. So that's how, of course, it's an illusion. And I thought, of course, it was very well done. It was action packed. I love the art by Jesus Hervez. I apologize for butchering the name. I thought the colors by David Barron were excellent. And I really loved cover B, which shows Captain Boomerang on the cover. I thought it just sort of pops off the page. If you're for fans of Captain Boomerang, it's a must-buy cover. So this was probably one of my favorites this week. I just really enjoyed it. I've been enjoying this series, and it's kind of a guilty pleasure for me, this particular series. And I'm not someone who plays the video game, so I'm happy with it.
Yeah, again, I mean, I think you're going to get even more out of it if you do play the video game. If you don't, I think it's, you're still going to enjoy it, because we both have been. All right, up next we have a Black Label book. Really curious to get your thoughts about this. It's written and drawn by Junie Ba, whose name I've heard before, but it's not really a creator that I'm that familiar with. It's colored by Chris O'Halloran, and it's a Robin book. It's called Robin, or actually no, it's just called The Boy Wonder. Book 1. So what? And I should also mention letters are by Aditya Bidikar. So give us your thoughts on this one.
Well, straight up, I was just bored. I can't believe this is Black Label. This felt like it should be written for children. Why is this Black Label? Why isn't this all ages? I have no idea why this is Black Label. It read like a child's book. I thought it was written like a child's book. This should be written for children. I actually felt that this has been done before, this plot line. I got to tell you, the story here did not entice me. The art's fine. Junie Ba's art. I don't know. Is that a man or a woman? Do you know?
Don't know.
Okay, I apologize, but I don't want to call them whether man or woman. Junie's art is good. I don't mind the art, but it felt a little bit like it was written for a younger audience. So and that's fair. But why is it Black Label? This certainly does not have adult themes. This is Damien, who basically he feels like an outcast. He's in the family. He feels sort of disrespected, and he wants to sort of and he's sort of basically grounded by Batman, and he basically wants to make a name for himself in the Bat family, and he ends up each page. I got to tell you, the individual pages, it really felt like I was reading something that was in a children's graphic novel. This was not a sophisticated story at all. This is themes that we've seen before. This is Damien gaining respect for Nightwing, yet at the same time being kind of jealous. We've seen this Damien before a lot. Now, if this was somebody who is not familiar, if you want to give to a younger audience, if you want to give this, let's put it this way, somebody who's not familiar much with the Bat family, and it's a younger reader, this would be perfect for them. This is why. There's no way this should be Black Label. As a longtime reader, I can't get this. I've seen this before. I mean, 100 different times in a much better written story. This is not a sophisticated enough story for me. This feels, it doesn't have the plot points that I find interesting. It's been done before. We've seen this 1,000 different times, 1,000 different ways. I just, and the backgrounds are non-existent. And again, I could be, I'm being very polite with the art, because if I'm judging this by Black Label standards, I'm going to be much more harsh, and I could go on a rant, but I'm just being nice. But if this was a children's book, I'm thinking, oh, this is perfect. This is what I would expect. This is right up there with DC superhero girls, straight up. I'm stunned by this. I'm stunned. Editorially, who thought this was a Black Label? On what grounds is this a Black Label book? Honestly, if a set of breasts showed up, or some kind of nudity, or vulgarity of any kind, or swear words with this type of art on this very simplistic, uncomplicated storyline, would be completely would not be appropriate for this. Like I say, I'm just surprised. This is not Black Label. This is a misnomer. And again, it's not a bad story, but it's absolutely one, as a long-time reader, that I've seen this before a lot, and I'm not interested in it. The art's it's not the DC House style. I'm not a fan of it. Maybe if people are a fan of, maybe it's not even a manga style, really. I don't know. But again, it feels like almost like a version of Teen Titans Go. There are pages where if you told me this was a Teen Titans Go comic that Cartoon Network put out or something, I'd say, oh yeah, okay, not bad. And I collect animated comic books. I got a huge collection. I love it in that respect. But this, it's an odd cover. It's I'm not really sure. It just the whole thing just sort of caught me off guard. And again, let me end on a positive note. I think there's an audience for this, but the audience is going to be completely missed, because some DC editorial guy labeled this Black Label, and probably should reevaluate his job prospects, as far as I'm concerned, because this is just a significant editorial oversight and miss. But I don't know. Maybe that was harsh. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it definitely was harsh. This isn't a bad story by any stretch. Is it juvenile? Yeah, it's probably a little juvenile. But again, I don't think it's a bad story by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, it is a more simplistic story. And then in terms of Black Label doesn't necessarily mean mature. It means it's out of continuity. Why is this out of continuity? Well, I don't know, to be honest, because there's nothing that happens in here that really means that it needs to be, out of continuity. But it's only the first issue. Maybe something's going to happen. Maybe that's the whole point of it. Maybe Batman dies at the end. Like, I have no idea. But it could simply be a marketing thing where they said, okay, let's tell everybody this is Black Label, so that they know they can read this, and it doesn't matter if they're caught up on current Batman, DC, lore and status, blah blah blah, whatever. So it's fine. It gives the creator kind of carte blanche to do whatever they want in the story, and they don't have to worry about what's going on in Absolute Power, what's going on in Zdarsky's Batman, or whatever. Just because it says Black Label on the front of it doesn't necessarily mean it has to have mature themes. I never expect that. But on the other hand, is this for me? No, this is not for me. This is definitely aimed at a younger audience. Somebody who's a big fan of Damian Wayne. He's got a lot of agency here. He narrates this. When I heard that this was coming out, I saw that it was called The Boy Wonder. I was hoping for Dick Grayson or Tim Drake. Even Jason Todd would have been okay. The fact that it's Damian, for me, that's just. I go back to something else I said recently about Damian Wayne. I don't feel that Damian ever should have been a Robin. Robin to me is a role for somebody who's young and needs to be trained in the arts of crime fighting and hand-to-hand combat and that sort of thing. And Damian, he kind of knew all that stuff. The training he needed was how not to be a dick. And to me, that's just not Robin. It's why Damian is and always will be my least favorite Robin. As far as him as a character, he's not as unlikable as he used to be. So I'm able to tolerate him now. Like it used to be, if Damian was in a comic, I just couldn't even read it. He was such a little jerk all the time. Um, so I'm not predisposed to like this anyway because it stars Damian. Um, and I still have, I very much still have a soft spot in my heart for Tim Drake. And it's like, man, we get Damian. We are force fed Damian constantly, and I wish we had more of Tim Drake. Jason Todd, he is. There's a character that's completely undergone a transformation. He's in no way like he was when he was Robin, and then obviously um, Dick Grayson with his Nightwing persona is, he gets plenty of screen time as well. So, but Tim, it feels like Tim's the one that's kind of lost in the shuffle, and in a lot of ways, Tim is my Robin because he was, he had that series in the '90s that was so just kind of its time, and I really enjoyed it. So anyway, let's move on. Speaking of Batman, we have Batman number 147 up next. Dark Prisons Part 3, written by Chip Zdarsky, art by Jorge Jimenez, colors by Tomeo Morey, letters by Clayton Cowles. We do get some Tim Drake here. What did you think?
I I found this interesting on a number of levels. In this issue we finally have the beginning of Failsafe entering into the absolute power storyline, or hints at it, because Amanda Waller is keeping an eye on Gotham City, and she sees that this new Batman is very aggressive and does things a little bit differently, and so Amanda Waller makes moves to confront Failsafe. Now, I'm not even sure that Amanda Waller knows that. I mean, Amanda Waller probably knows that Zur-Na has taken over Failsafe's programming and is now in control of Batman. Who knows? But if Amanda Waller does know that, she hasn't said so, but she does approach Batman, and she does approach Failsafe Batman and basically make a proposition to him, because she wants, of course, we know what her end game is. She wants to, she views all the heroes as threats. And Failsafe here is Zur has Damian through most of this issue on his side, because Damian believes that this is actually his dad, and Damian doesn't discover until the end that it's really Zur that's taken over, and that Bruce is missing. And it's what I find very interesting is how Zur doesn't view Bruce Wayne as a threat anymore. I mean, this issue has, in parts of this issue, it shows Bruce Wayne, first fleeing to Rhode Island, where where the old Justice League headquarters is, and he's hoping that Failsafe doesn't find him, or Zur doesn't come looking for him, and whereas if you recall in the Failsafe storyline, Batman couldn't hide anywhere. Batman couldn't even hide on the Justice League satellite, because Failsafe was going to find him. No matter where Batman fled, Failsafe could find him. Well, here, Zur-Na is so arrogant, and he believes he's so superior to Bruce Wayne, he's not even concerned with Bruce Wayne. He's not even concerned with what Bruce might be up to. And at one point, which I thought was very interesting, and I like what Chip Zdarsky did here, is that he basically has Captio, Dr. Captio, who's who Zur made warden of the sort of like Blackgate Penitentiary. Dr. Captio says to Zur, you know what, you're assuming that you're going to be able to control. You're assuming you're going to be able to control, but you should maybe worry about what Bruce is up to, because he kind of knows what he's doing. I mean, he's a threat. I mean, you realize that how many times has Bruce always come back from the brink of defeat and always ended up defeating his enemies? You're making the same mistake countless villains have done before, Zur. Like, what's going on? But nonetheless, Zur tells himself that he's got nothing to worry about. He ends up exposing. He ends up showing. Showing Damian the Amazo robots, and I apologize to those people watching. It's hard for me to do this and then flip to the correct screen at the same time. But he shows Zur shows Damian the Amazo robots that are going to be whose they're going to be controlled by the various Zers in the multiverse. The consciousnesses of all the Zers in the multiverse are going to be transported into these bodies of the Amazo robots controlled by Zer, and that's going to be how Failsafe Zer slash Failsafe controls Gotham, and ultimately will probably end up working with Amanda Waller to control the world, because initially here, Failsafe or Zer is lured in by Amanda Waller, but he tells Amanda Waller, "Stay away from me, Amanda Waller. I want nothing to do with you." But Waller says, sooner or later they're going to come after you. And of course, Waller's right. And even if Waller wasn't right, she would set things up to make it look like the heroes were after Zer. And so ultimately, you can already see the mechanisms that are in place that are going to have Zer eventually turn and side with Amanda Waller. And at the end here, Damian tries to escape, tries to take out Zer and escape, but is ultimately defeated. And we're introduced to a brand new Robin. I'm not sure if this is a fail-safe Robin, but it's a brand new Robin that Zer sort of creates to replace Damian. And meanwhile, of course, at the end, while he's hidden somewhere in a forest near the old Justice League headquarters near Rhode Island, Bruce Wayne ends up, Tim Drake finds him, and I'll let you talk about that, and then we can talk about the backup, which I also really enjoyed. But what did you think of the main story?
Yeah, I thought the main story was really good. I mean, what I enjoyed most about it, so throughout the Zdarsky run, I don't want to say harsh, but there's been a part of me that I haven't really liked the characterization. I've talked in the past about the characterization that we've gotten for Batman and for Bruce, how it didn't feel authentic. It didn't really, like, so many times I found myself during Zdarsky's run saying, I just don't see Bruce doing that. I just don't see Bruce ever acting like that or what have you. Now we've got an in-story reason, why that's the case. It was Zernar's influence on Bruce. It was, you mentioned kind of the arrogance that Zernar has to think that he basically is knows everything that Bruce knows, to the point where he doesn't work. Like you said, he's not worried about him at all, because he feels like, oh man, and again, it goes back to what you were saying about how, man, countless Batman villains have done this, right? The kind of fatal flaw of hubris, thinking they know better and they're going to be able to defeat Batman or whatever. So now we have this villain, failsafe. Let's call it what it is. He is a villain who's like, okay, well, I've been in Bruce Wayne's head. I've been in Batman's head. So I know everything he knows, and there's no way he could possibly defeat me. If you've been in Batman's head and you know Bruce Wayne maybe better than anybody, maybe better than Bruce knows himself, because there may be times where Bruce is, self-deluding himself or not letting himself be objective. Then you've seen all these villains make this fatal mistake, lean into this idea that I know better, I'm going to be able to defeat Batman. Like, you have that knowledge. Failsafe, how can you be making that same mistake? But on the other hand, let's look at it in terms of the way Zerna was created. If there's anybody in the story that Zdarsky's crafted who has anywhere near the same level of, let's call it ego, the same level of just belief that they are, the smartest guy in the room, it's Captio, right? And so, in a way, you could almost think of Zerna and thus Failsafe as kind of this weird love child between the psyche of Bruce Wayne and the psyche of Captio. And in order for Bruce to do the things that he does, he does sort of have to have some level of hubris himself, um, just in order to go out and do what he does, right? Like, he has to have belief in himself that he's able to jump from rooftops and fall from the moon and live, and that sort of thing. Like, it requires, to some extent, a high level of belief in yourself, maybe to the extent of ridiculousness. Like, hey, you're going to believe in yourself to the point of, yeah, I can jump from the moon and live. when that just might not be the best way to spend your Saturday afternoon or what have you. But I say all that to say this, like maybe the reason that Failsafe struggles so much is that uh, as much as we think of him as he's this like computerized thing and he should be infallible or whatever. I mean, he's only going to be as good as his programming, and if he is in a way some sort of weird love child of Captio and Bruce Wayne, maybe he never had a chance but to be anything but this super arrogant, I can't be defeated sort of entity, right? Um, but again, going back to what Zdarsky's done so well here is now that Zur is not, because now Bruce realizes, hey, for the last little while, Zur-Na has really been influencing my thoughts and my behavior and my personality or what have you. Oh well, for how long? That doesn't make sense. Zur-Na has been around since the beginning of Bruce Wayne when he was trained by Captio, as we saw in Tom Taylor's uh, what was that series? Oh, no, not Tom Taylor. Zdarsky wrote it. Like the Dark Knight, was that what it was called?
Batman the Night. Batman
Yeah,
the Night.
Batman. Yeah, where he went around and was doing his training, what have you. Well, that's how long that was at the very beginning. Well, not really. How long has Zur-Na been really influencing Batman? Well, only since Zdarsky came on the book. So let's say the end of Joker War, we could really kind of nail it down. So not too long. But it does explain his erratic behavior. It does explain him, like again, so often I was saying he's just not making choices that seem rational. Like I don't understand why he's doing the things that he's doing. And now, we have an in story reason for that. And that's fine. And that's really great that we have that. And I appreciate that Zdarsky did that. But even more than him telling us that, he shows us that. He shows us that when Tim Drake shows up at the cabin where Bruce is hiding out, and just the way that Bruce talks to Tim, the way that he admits that he's at his best when he's got the family with him. He's got the help of Barbara as Oracle, or Nightwing fighting side by side, or even Jason Todd helping him on a case. That's when he's at his best, which is completely diametrically opposed to what he was saying previously, where he was talking about I need to be out on my own, and we saw that at the end of Gotham, where he was going to take off and be by himself or whatever, and it just didn't make sense. Never made sense to me. So I really appreciate that aspect of the story. And this might be one of my favorite issues of the run up to this point for exactly that reason. There is a backup. It's called Show the World. It's also by Zdarsky with incredible art by Miguel Mendoca. And it kind of leans into what I was just saying about kind of the hubris of Captio as a character. So you want to give us your thoughts on the backup?
I really like the backup because I think Chip Zdarsky is building on the central conceit and the conception of Edward Nygma, the Riddler, that Tom King hinted at in Batman Riddler One Bad Day. Because Dr. Captio sees in Edward Nygma, he knows that Edward Nygma is a genius. And he tells him that. And but he also says that he accuses Nygma of, despite being a genius, the Riddler always allows his ego is in constant battle with his chronic embarrassment that he faces by being defeated by Batman relentlessly. It's very interesting the way Dr. Captio described how he sees Edward Nygma. And it made me see Edward Nygma in a way that sort of builds on how Tom King presented him. Now, because the idea that Edward Nygma really is he's super intelligent. But here's the problem. Edward Nygma is probably, you could argue, maybe Edward Nygma is the 5th or 6th or 7th smartest person on the planet. That's not outside the realm of possibility. But if Lex Luthor's the smartest and Batman's the 2nd smartest in the DC universe, does it really matter who is 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th? And probably 3rd, 4th, and 5th, you're looking at Mr. Terrific, Dr. Midnight. You could fill in the gaps. But maybe he's in 10th or 11th place. But if Edward Nygma is even in the top 20, it's a hell of an accomplishment. But when your central nemesis is Batman and you're 20th most intelligent, you're always going to get beaten by Batman. But as Dr. Captio says, Edward, for God's sakes, man, you could be a billionaire sitting on a yacht somewhere. Why are you punishing yourself by being a two-bit villain in Gotham City, being routinely and regularly embarrassed by arguably the most intelligent, by Batman? Why are you putting yourself through this? And he really sort of embarrasses and humiliates Edward Nygma. But Edward Nygma turns the tide, as Captio is beating up some other prisoners. He makes Dr. Captio realize that maybe Dr. Captio is a lot like Edward Nygma. They've both been embarrassed by Bruce Wayne, or I guess Batman. And but Captio and Nygma, what I found interesting, at least how I saw it, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts, is it's almost as if maybe Captio and Edward Nygma are kindred souls here. They've got more in common than not. Or maybe Dr. Captio is just playing Nygma for a fool. But remember the mistake that Dr. Captio made with the Joker. And the Joker got one up on Captio. Captio thought he understood the Joker, but the Captio almost killed Dr. Captio. And so is Dr. Captio now going to underestimate the Riddler? Because at the end of this, Dr. Captio teases the Riddler by saying, Dr. Captio claims that he still wants to help Batman through conventional and unconventional means. And he says, "What do you say, Edward? Care to change your mind?" So I'm wondering, is Dr. Captio going to do something to the mind of Edward Nygma? And if he does, how does Captio think that's going to help Batman? I mean, Dr. Captio's idea of help, well, seems to me is probably not in Batman's best interest. So this really, really interests me, this backup. And it's because I love what Tom King is doing to elevate the Penguin. I love what he did with Batman Riddler One Bad Day, how he elevated Nygma. And while I thought that was out of continuity, I think the concept or the idea of a super intelligent, underrated, and almost he hurts himself. Edward Nygma has always kept himself down. Can you imagine an Edward Nygma who allows himself to let go of his ego and just be the best type of person that he could be? Then maybe he could defeat Batman. I mean, just a new way to look at the Riddler. In any event, I'm just sort of spitballing here. I like what this does, and I like what Chip Zdarsky has done here. And a lot of the things that Zdarsky does in the backups, he doesn't always, I think, necessarily follow through on. This is one where I hope he certainly does. And I'm really curious to know what Dr. Captio has in mind for Edward Nygma. So what do you think about the backup?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. These are kindred souls, right? And at least the argument could be made that although Captio may be more intelligent than Edward Nygma, it's a fool's errand to actually try to rank people, because it all depends on the particular writer and the particular story. So whatever needs for that story, that's who it's going to be. But Captio, obviously, extremely, extremely intelligent, and we know Edward Nygma is as well. But I think the difference being that Nygma's got a little bit more self-awareness, right? He realizes, because you're 100% correct, and Captio's correct, he could have invented something, or he could have created something, or done investments, or any number of things. He's smart enough that he could be a billionaire just sitting on the beach, on a beach somewhere, earning 20% interest and be set for life. But he has this obsession with Batman. But at least he recognizes. Captio doesn't. And that's maybe a failure. Maybe that's a fault of hubris as well. Seems to be a theme of this episode here. But at least Nygma sees it. He says to Captio, "You're obsessed as well." And Captio tries to play it off. "Oh, I'm just interested because Bruce Wayne, I trained him, and I just want to see how it all plays out," or whatever. Like, dude, you allowed yourself to be the prisoner of the Joker. You allowed your face to be mutilated. You left a secretive life in Europe where you basically had everything you want. You already were sitting on that beach. To come to Gotham City and be closer to Bruce, so you can observe what happens between him and the Joker, him and Failsafe, that sort of thing. Like, yeah, who's really the fool here, Captio? Is it the Riddler, or is it yourself? So, yeah, maybe take a look in the mirror. So, yeah, fascinating. Um, I do wonder, with what we saw in Batman the Night and what we've seen of Captio here, is this his straight up villain origin story? Will he end up wearing a colorful costume and that sort of thing? I sort of don't think so. He's not that kind of character. Um, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him sort of be more of a villain, be more of because he still is sort of a secretive character, not widely known by the rest of the DC universe. I could see him sort of heading down the path of like a Hugo Strange. At times, Doctor Hugo Strange has been thought of as respectable and what have you, but really we know he's a villain. So, but at the same time, it's like, well, we already have that character. We already have Hugo Strange. Um, and is Captio just that? I hope if he does go down that path, that I hope he can be different enough from Hugo that he doesn't feel repetitive. But um, it is this backup is really interesting because it's like both these guys are saying the quiet part out loud, right? Like Captio's like, you and all these other, and it might not be within the realm of possibility for some Batman villains to really go, hey, get away from Gotham City, stop trying to beat Batman, go and hit your big score or use your intelligence to create something that's going to make you a lot of money, and then just go and live the rest of your life. uh that's what you guys should be doing. What are you wasting your time? Kind of like last issue, right, with the Harley Quinn story, where at the beginning they do that heist and they don't leave any umbrellas or clues or whatever, and lo and behold, the police don't know
Uh,
who to look for. That's what Captio is saying here. Like, you guys are idiots, getting dressed up in your colorful costumes and obsessed with Batman. um so he's saying the quiet part out loud, but Nigma's turning the tables on him, and he's saying the quiet part out loud as well, going, dude, you're just as obsessed with Batman. Look at the life you've led since Bruce Wayne has come into it. Since Bruce Wayne has come into your life, he's been your sole focus. You're just as obsessed. So, interesting take from Zdarsky. And
yeah,
I'll also say the Miguel Mendoza art is really fantastic in that backup as well.
yeah.
All right, up next we have Poison Ivy. We're up to issue 22. It's almost been 2 full years of G. Willow Wilson's take on Poison Ivy. And really, the argument could be made that she's been telling kind of one long story arc, sort of a new, updated, modern origin story, if you will, for Pamela Isley. And at the end of this issue, with what's teased at the ending, with how Pamela appears to be trying to finally defeat Jason Woodrow, the Floronic Man, once and for all. She's willing to sacrifice her life. She says, if my life is a price I have to pay to remove Woodrow from the face of the earth, then so be it. So really powerful story here, written by G. Willow Wilson. As I said, the art in this issue is by Hanning, colors are by Arif Prianto, letters by Hassan Atzman Elhau. And we did see, starting, I think, about 5 issues ago, we saw the college years of Pamela Isley and how she was tied in, so much her origin and the way she got her powers and what have you, with the Floronic Man, with the Gardener, with Alec Holland, who eventually became Swamp Thing, and really sort of gave her that grounding, and made us understand who she was, why she made the choices that she made. And I think it really fits the sensibility of where DC wants Poison Ivy now. And I do have mixed feelings because I think she is one of the better Batman villains. Um, but the fact that DC has basically taken Harley Quinn from villain to anti-hero to hero, and so many people really love the relationship of Poison Ivy and Harley. It's like, well, if Harley's a hero, how can you have her in a relationship with somebody who's a villain? At best, you have to have Poison Ivy as kind of an anti-hero, kind of like Batman and Catwoman, right? A lot of times Catwoman does things that are for the greater good, but she just likes to enrich herself, along the way with, monetary means and what have you. So I understand why DC is doing this, and I think G. Willow Wilson is doing a really good job of sort of painting it in the best light possible. Okay, if we're going to lose a really classic villain, at least help us understand and do it in such a way that makes sense, right? So go back to the very beginning, flesh out her origin even more, make it make sense, make her conflicted, make us understand why she at times committed acts of eco-terrorism or whatever. It's all about defending the earth. Now, can you go back and read every previous Poison Ivy story, pre G. Willow Wilson's run here, and say, okay, I can see why she did this. I can see why she did that. It makes perfect sense, what have you. No, you can't. There are going to be inconsistencies because she was an out and out villain for a long time. So if you go back, she's going to do things that you just can't reconcile with the origin and the story that we've been told in this series. But that's okay. Again, maybe that's the Poison Ivy you like, and you still have those stories. You can go back and enjoy them anytime you want. But I think this makes Poison Ivy a more interesting character because as much as I thought she has always been a very good Batman villain, she's been a Batman villain that was sort of two-dimensional in a lot of ways. She had her shtick, and that's what she did. And Batman would always find a way to defeat her. Sometimes all it would take would be like some nose plugs, right, to not breathe in pheromones or whatever. So what she can do here with the way her powers have been expanded, sort of with these Lambia spores, with her origin being updated, with what we see in this issue, with her willing to sacrifice herself to get rid of Jason Woodrow. I think that's really interesting. I think that says a lot about who Pamela Isley is as a character, and a lot about her, what she's willing to do and how much she cares about life. Yes, plant life, but really all life in general. And the last thing I'll say that I do find really interesting, it's almost like Jason Woodrow, to some extent, has sort of taken the place of the old Poison Ivy in terms of just being an out and out villain, and being a bit of a megalomaniac and not caring about anything but himself. And he, espouses these values of, oh, I'm just trying to protect the plant life. That's really not what it's about. It's about him having power. It's about him having control. And that's just the means to it, which is not so different from the previous Poison Ivy that we had at times when she was just a straight up villain. So again, I think G. Willow Wilson's done a fantastic job in the series. I've been extremely impressed. As far as the art goes, it's very messy by Hanning. But when I look at this art and I see how much detail and rendering and interesting page layouts with vines as the panel dividers or whatever, oh my God, this guy put in just a ton of work in this. So although it's not my favorite style because it's sort of messy at times, it does suit the story because it does feel very organic. And again, just fantastic job. All the credit to him for really pulling out all the stops. So people that like this kind of style, and it's not really that different from the Marcio Takara, who's been the main artist on the series. If you've been liking Takara's art, you're going to be blown away by this. So I also thought the color work was done really well in this issue as well.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I echo a lot of your sentiments, and in particular, just a comment on the colors. I really liked how green is associated with Poison Ivy on all the pages, and this sort of off purple is associated with Jason Woodrow. And so the collage of colors that you get is just, it's insane. And the level of detail, it's crazy. It's almost as if Hanning just almost every shape, all the vines, it seems everything seems intentional, and it really looks amazing. And what's also interesting here is that this is, there are times here where Poison Ivy herself, even though we know she's willing to sacrifice herself, and this is really kind of her own anti-hero's journey, or perhaps a hero's journey, if you want to call it that. Opinions may vary on that, but I think you're right that she's definitely made the transition closer to hero than anti-hero here. I like this look of Poison Ivy. She's got almost, if I didn't know better, if I don't read a lot of Marvel's X-Men, but I mean, it almost looks like she could be a mutant. She looks like a mutant character with especially with on her face, the way Haining draws her. She really looks intimidating and very powerful. And I think she's got a really cool look to her. And when you juxtapose this battle between this new Poison Ivy versus Jason Woodrow, and you know what their relationship was, and they were teacher and student, and he manipulated her, and now he's now ultimately she basically, as you said, was the villain, and then the teacher, he's surpassed the student in terms of villainy, and the student then sees the error of her ways, and she becomes the hero at the end of it. I mean, there's a journey here that as a criticism to Wilson, we could say that it's taken, this has been a 22 issue story. You could say this is a 22 issue story, and it's still not over yet. So I think that's a legitimate criticism. On the other hand, I will give Wilson credit because she's convinced. Like, I mean, again, there's still a part of me that I really like. I like my psychotic, evil Poison Ivy, but I cannot deny that J. Wilson she's done a very admirable job, even for a hard nut to crack like me, to say, yeah, this is a journey that, I mean, it possesses verisimilitude. I'm actually buying into this. It's a little wonky with the continuity, and there's some mental gymnastics maybe you could jump through if you're a diehard continuity buff with Poison Ivy, but it does work. And, there's an argument that could be made, and you alluded to it. Does DC corporate, do they want their most popular their most popular character who's LGBTQ? Do they want her to be she supports the environment? Do they really want Poison Ivy to be an eco-terrorist? Probably not. They probably don't, especially when they're with their other famous one, like you said, Harley Quinn. They're not going to do that. I guess the only saving grace for those of us who prefer Harley and Poison Ivy as villains is that we can occasionally get a Black Label story that is told out of continuity, and we can embrace that. But in any event, I thought this was well done. I don't think this was more of a visual feast for me. I think most of this dialogue we didn't need. This was just beautiful to look at the pages. This was really, really gorgeous. And I find it very interesting that instead of the bright colors that pop off the page, everything's darker, which is perfectly symbolic. We got the darker green and the darker purple, which is perfectly symbolic of these two creatures battling each other, ultimately for the fate of humanity. So you expect it to be darker. And then I'm wondering if, just an open question, when this final battle is over, are we going to see a different color palette and maybe brighter colors and less of the subdued darkness? We'll have to wait and see. But in any event, I thought this was well done. Although in terms of the substance in this issue, this was more, I think, of an art. This was a visual feast, this issue, as opposed to really moving the story that much forward.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't move the story forward that much. But it does set up something really interesting for the finale, I think. And we do have a couple of, I guess I don't know why it's posted on here twice. Oh, I guess there's a Virgin version. So we've got one with trade dress and one without. But there's a fantastic Frank Cho variant cover that's just amazing. So. Yeah. All right, on to the last book we're going to talk about in detail. It's Kneel Before Zod, issue number 5, written by Joe Casey. Dan McDade is the artist. David Barron on colors. Troy Petrie on letters. When we last left Zod, it was almost like he was trying to commit suicide, but then was picked up by this spaceship, I guess, for lack of a better term. So what are your thoughts on this issue, where when we see Zod, he's almost Spawn-like in his appearance?
Last issue ended with Zod sort of attacking the Khund warship, and he destroyed it. And arguably Zod was in a very weakened state. He was burned to a crisp, and he was floating in space, barely alive, possibly dead. And then this other ship picked him up, and I assumed it was another Khund warship, but it isn't. It appears to be a prison ship, and he is revived in this issue, and of course his body is still healing, and one can presume that the reason why it's taken Zod's body so long to heal, because it's still not even healed by the end of this issue. Obviously he's away from a yellow sun, and so that's why his body's probably not healing as fast as it normally would. This is, I got mixed feelings about this issue, and but it has to do with my mixed feelings about the manner and the direction of which writer Joe Casey has taken this character and this character arc, this journey that Zod is on to embracing his full evilness. And Joe Casey, of course, made it clear in interviews that he wants to go back to like an evil Zod. I mean, clearly that's the journey that we're on here. Zod is someone who feels betrayed by his son. He feels his wife has been, Ursa has been killed by the Kuns. He feels, so where is Zod now? He presumably at the end of last issue, you could argue that perhaps he didn't care if he lived or died. He destroyed the Kun worship in a fit of anger. And now he wakes up and he's alive. And by the end of this issue, this prison worship, he basically kills all the people running this prison's worship, and he basically forcibly controls all the inmates of this ship, and he forms what he calls the Legion of Zod. And that's really it. Now there's some great action sequences. We see the surprise of the crew as they can't believe they can't control this person that they picked up and is floating in space. This person that they thought, of course, they unfortunately for them they had no idea this was a Kryptonian. This was one of the most powerful, General Zod. And so it actually kind of reminded me a little bit. And even though it's different, it reminded me for some reason I kept thinking of Batman Offworld, except it's not as good. But the idea that, this per ship has no idea what they just like on Batman Offworld issue 1, they had no idea that they had Batman on the ship. And these per bastards had no idea that their next prisoner or inmate would be this General Zod. And he ends up controlling the ship. Now, in that respect, he controls the ship, but I couldn't help but feel in this issue that what had happened, it didn't feel like a lot of substance to me because I'm asking myself, I just feel that we've abandoned the storylines that for me were by far the most interesting. I was interested in the relationship that Zod has with his son. I'm interested in Zod turning more evil, but with his wife Ursa at his side. Forming a Legion of Zod, this feels like, what are you, writing an episode of Super Friends? That's what it felt like to me, reading this comic. It felt like an episode of Super Friends. It just seemed a little bit cliche, a little bit. So now, and what's Zod gonna do now? He's just angry. I mean, he left his planet. He had an entire planet with a mega weapon on it. He destroys it. He leaves. Doesn't seem to care where his son is. And now he cares about forming a Legion of Zod. Why? What's he gonna do? So now he's like a glorified biker gang. He's gonna fly around the universe and be like an older version of his son, who also has a younger gang driving around the universe. I'm not. I understand that this Zod is really pissed off, but I would show me how this evolves his capacity for evil. And I think there was more potential for that in my mind when he had an entire planet that he could control, and he had influence with the United Planets. I was more interested in that General Zod than the one I'm seeing here now. Straight up, this is only issue 5. I think there's only one issue left. But I'm just reestablishing a status quo where General Zod is just a guy, Kryptonian, wandering through space with a bunch of new prisoners that he's like Amanda Waller now. All the inmates he can cause them. He can push a button and give them headaches and fry their brains if they don't do what he says. It felt disappointing to me, and I was disappointed with it. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Casey can't, maybe if this ends next issue and this is the status quo, so be it. I'm disappointed in it, but I'm not saying future writers can't do something with it, but I just feel we lost Ursa for this. I mean, he loses an entire planet for this. I don't know how this makes this character more interesting, to be honest with you. And now I will happily put the foot in my mouth if I'm wrong next issue. But this seems to me to be this was definitely a status quo change for General Zod, but one that I don't find him more interesting. He was far more interesting as a leader of an entire planet. Uh, and turn him into a Hitler if you want. He was arguably already engaging in eugenics by creating a new clone army on his planet. I mean, he was doing the Hitlerian thing as it was. That's evil enough, isn't it? Okay, now you're making him more evil, but you've demoted him because now he's just a leader of a bunch of prisoners that are forced to do his bidding. I don't know. I just felt disappointed. Maybe you feel differently. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I do. I completely understand what you're saying, right? Like the argument could be made that yes, a Zod that rules a planet and has like ruling a planet. All these people, Doom's the one that constantly comes to mind. I talk about it all the time. That Emperor Doom graphic novel from the '80s, where Doom gets the thing that he always wanted, and that he's bored out of his mind. Like all these people ask for all this power, and they want to be able to make all these decisions or whatever, but they don't realize that it's a lot of work. If you rule a planet, you got to make every decision. Like, oh my
Yeah.
god, how terrible would that be, right? Um, but the other and yeah, again, I think that's a more interesting Zod. There's more stories to be told or explored there. But DC, they hired Joe Casey to write this, and he takes a look. He talked about it at San Diego Comic Con last year when this was announced. Hey, he takes a look at Zod, and he's like, he's a farmer. He's got his own planet. Like he's married. Like he's not acting like this is not the General Zod that I know. And he really leaned into it here. I mean, we even had Ursa telling him, "Hey, you're not the guy that I married, basically." And what I kept going back to, and I mentioned this, I talked about this either after we did issue 2 or 3, whatever. I think it was issue 2, the one where Ursa was like super nag. Um, and I'm like, okay, so Zod has been this, evil bastard, this guy who's been singularly focused. All I care about is, establishing a new Krypton and, you know, uh, justice for Kryptonians and what have you. And he's been this whole time wanting to establish a new Krypton for Kryptonians, and that's been his singular focus. And he's willing to, do things that others would consider to be despicable to accomplish that. And but what happens when you achieve that goal? Are you not allowed to dial back on being an absolute bastard? It's like, okay, I spent all my
Apparently not.
life, yeah, I spent all my life trying to do the thing, and now I've done the thing. Like, can I kick my feet up and have a glass of iced tea? Well, according to Ursa, you can't, right? Like you just can't. You've got to continue to be a bastard, apparently. Um, so again, I there's part of me that's like, okay, I think that's a more interesting Zod. But if it takes the edge off him, and that's not what DC wants, then he's their character. And if this was the status quo or what have you, or the new, or if it's returning Zod to his previous evil ways, and this is how it needs to be done, then this is how it needs to be done. They trust Joe Casey, so I feel like he's telling the story they've hired him to write. Now, whether that's a more interesting Zod or not, I think it's up for debate because you and I both feel there's plenty there to be explored with him, running a planet or what have you. But at the same time, I can see this is an iconic character, and Zod married with a son, um, making decisions on what tax rates should be and what crop rotations are. That's probably not that interesting to most people. So I can understand them wanting to return him to kind of a more recognizable Zod, and that's the cool thing about comics, right? These characters ultimately can be pretty malleable, and you can do a lot of different things with them. So I don't mind, I don't mind this, the direction it's taken. Does it feel a little cliche? And yeah, it does. In fact, what it feels a little bit to me like is a little bit of Thanos, with him going out and recruiting. I think it was the Jason Aaron like Thanos origin miniseries or what have you, where we got the early days of Thanos and when he first went out into space and kind of took over. It wasn't exactly the same because Zod's taken over a prison ship here and freed the prisoners. Thanos took over like what was already like a pirate ship. Um, so yeah, not exactly the same, but kind of close. So again, I'm enjoying this. I really like the fact that Zod was looking very Spawn like. He's like all his skin is still burned off. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And the Dan McDade art, as it's been throughout, has been really fantastic. So no complaints there either. So yeah, all in all, I'm still enjoying this quite a bit.
Yeah, and I should give I never made any comment on it, but one of the things that Joe Casey's done every issue, there's always been at least one scene where General Zod is sort of hallucinating or imagining a conversation with Jor-El. And in this issue, he imagines as he's recovering in stasis, he's imagining a conversation with himself as a boy, or I don't. Presumably, it's the scene that maybe took place, or he's changing it in his mind about a conversation he had as a young man with a young Jor-El, where where General Zod's father sort of banished him, and he was sort of in doing his rite of passage in the same way that he banished his son Lord Zod in issue one, and so it clearly I think what Joe Casey's trying to convey here is a General Zod that has always been very, very aggressive, but what he's done lately has sort of he's abandoned who he really is, and he's tried to embrace diplomacy, embrace being a leader when he is really meant to be a conqueror, like you were saying. Like he needs very clearly that's where this is going, and that he doesn't want to do things the conventional way, and that if Krypton would have listened to him, Krypton wouldn't have been destroyed. Every time in Zod's mind, every time he has avoided his instinct, or in particular, whenever he's been defied, just like when the Kryptonian Council defied him, when Jor-El would defy him, when Superman would defy him, and he ends up ruling on even the new Kandor planet. Every time somebody defies him, it leads to something going wrong, and so all the more reason to be a better conqueror, so you can prevent defiance. And I think this is where Joe Casey is clearly pushing the character. And again, like we'll see. It all depends on how the story plays out and stuff. And I get it, but at the same time, there was still a lot of potential for Zod to be a pretty badass Hitler-like, Stalinist-like character with the background that he had. So now, as leaders of these prisoners, I'm really curious to see how much of a badass he'll become, because the United Planets maybe felt they could control General Zod as leader of New Kandor, but now that General Zod is leader of a rogue bunch of prisoners called the Legion of Zod, I suspect he might very well be a greater threat now than he ever was. There's no, I can certainly grant you that.
Yeah, it's true. Like, be careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Like I said, that's the last single issue that we're going to review this week. Last of the issues that came out. But there are a number of collections. We have Nightwing, A Night in Blood Haven Compendium Book 1 trade paperback, which collects the Scott McDaniel run of Nightwing. So the 95 miniseries 1 through 4, and then the 96 series 1 through 25, and then a bunch of annuals and specials and what have you. We also have Steelworks, which was the Michael Dorn written story, which we really, really enjoyed. That also is collected in trade, all 6 issues, plus the backup story that ran through Action Comics 1054, 1055, and 1056. And then finally, last trade this week is 52, Volume 1, trade paperback. This isn't New 52, but this is the 52 weekly series that came out over the course of a year, 1 issue every week. This Volume 1 has the first half, so it's 26 issues. So it's pretty large. 584 pages for $50. So those are the collections that are out this week. What's your book of the week, Rocky? Anything jump out for you?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with like I said, this wasn't really a lot of competition here this week for me. I Yeah, I got to go with. Got to find it here to bring it up. It's Batman for me. Batman issue 147. I really like the backup in particular. Put it over the top for me. I like that this is a good lead into introducing Zur slash Failsafe to Amanda Waller, and I think it's interesting, and I really like the characterization of Edward Nygma, Dr. Captio, approaching Nygma and what he might do, where that might head. Will Captio make the same mistake with the Riddler that he made with the Joker? Dr. Captio, his arrogance will be his undoing. I really, really liked it, and it stood out for me this week. Robert, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, again, nothing. I didn't feel that anything this week was terrible, but this is like my probably my one of my favorite, if not my favorite, issue of Batman that we've had during the Zdarsky run. So yeah, I have to choose that as well. Um, Not just for the strength of the main story, but as you mentioned, the strength of the backup. I thought was just fantastic. So pretty easy call this week. Yeah, got to go with that.
Huh.
Okay, so that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. I do have an interview that I did with Tom King about the upcoming Wonder Woman issue number 9, which comes out in a couple weeks on the 22nd of May. So that'll be up later this week. Look for that. Also, we're continuing the Spawn Daily, as well as other creator interviews. A lot of really great creator-owned campaigns going on right now. So be sure you check in on the other episodes. You can head over to the Comic Source YouTube channel. Just do a search for Comic Source and you can find it there, or just do a search on your favorite podcasting app or podcasting platform for the Comic Source and subscribe. Also, if you're listening on the audio only, whether it's this episode or any of the nearly 2,500 episodes we've done in the past for the Comic Source, and you aren't subscribed to the Comic Boom YouTube channel, you really need to subscribe. You can check out these DC Spotlights every week. You can see our smiling faces and all the fantastic art we're talking about. Just head over to Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom, exclamation point. Once you're there, you know what to do. Leave some comments. Let us know what you thought about the week of DC books. Ring the notification bell so you know when new content comes out, and be sure and subscribe. So that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. We appreciate you joining us as always, and we will talk to you next time.
Catch you later.